Do they think they can just walk in here, dressed like that? The whisper wasn't even subtle. First class cabin, gate A19, the air smelled of fresh leather, warm almonds, and entitlement. A hush followed the footsteps. Not silence, just a pause. The kind that only happens when someone unexpected enters a space they're not expected to belong to. And when Marcus Caldwell, in a charcoal hoodie, soft denim jeans, and understated sneakers, stepped into row 1A, the air shifted. Behind him, his wife Elise glided forward like poetry in motion, elegant, composed, dressed in a flowing white wrap dress. At her side, their daughter, Nia, just 6 years old, skipped happily while hugging a plush toy plane. The trio looked like any family excited for a vacation. But in the elite world of first class, where status whispers and wealth were cufflinks, they stood out, not because they lacked sophistication, but because of their skin color and their stillness. There was no fluster. No overcompensation. Just quiet confidence. Too quiet for some. Flight attendant Rachel Monroe noticed immediately. The crease of her lips never quite turned into a smile. She clutched her tablet tighter and took one step closer, her eyes scanning Marcus like she was running a background check, visually. Rachel had seen CEOs, movie stars, and tech giants in this cabin before. But she hadn't seen him. And worse, she didn't recognize what she saw. Marcus paused at their assigned seats, 1A, 1B, and 1C. He gently set down his carry-on, black leather, monogrammed, then looked toward Elise. "Here we are," he said simply. Elise smiled and helped Nia into her seat by the window, fastening her daughter's belt and placing the plush toy in her lap. Nia giggled, pressing the plane's light-up nose. Rachel Monroe moved in. "Excuse me," she said, her tone flat but firm. "May I see your boarding passes?" Marcus turned calmly. No defensiveness. No surprise. Just control. "Of course," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. The motion was smooth, deliberate, like a man used to being questioned but never shaken. He handed them over. Rachel barely glanced at Elise or Nia. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the passes. Then she paused. Row 1A. Row 1B. Row 1C. First class. Confirmed. But her brain, trained by habit and prejudice, couldn't compute it. "These are first class?" she asked, the question hanging like smoke. Marcus met her eyes, not with anger, but with precision. "Yes," he said simply. "These are our seats." Rachel swallowed. Her voice faltered for a moment but recovered with artificial sharpness. "I'll just need to verify something with the gate desk," she said. She turned and walked away briskly, like a soldier reporting a breach in protocol. In her wake, a few heads turned. Not all passengers noticed, but those who did, watched quietly. One man in a suit pretended to type on his laptop, but his eyes flickered between Rachel and Marcus. Elise leaned in. "That wasn't normal," she whispered. Marcus nodded faintly. "It's routine. For some of us." But even he felt it, that quiet erosion. That subtle attempt to reduce him from who he was to what she thought he might be. Behind the curtain, Rachel picked up the phone. "Hi, it's Monroe, Flight 764. I have a family seated in first class, and I just need to double-check the reservation." The ground staff on the other end paused. "What's the name?" "Caldwell. Marcus Caldwell. Wife and child. Row 1A to C." There was typing. A beat. Then. "Yes, that reservation was made weeks ago. Paid in full. First class." Rachel's stomach tightened. "No, I mean, okay. That's fine," she muttered, hanging up quickly. But when she turned, she didn't go back to apologize. She went back to challenge. She stepped in front of Marcus, her shoulders straighter, her voice colder. "I'm sorry, but we'll need you to step aside. There seems to be an error with your reservation." Marcus blinked slowly. "What kind of error?" "It's just protocol," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "If you could come with me, sir." Elisa's hand found Nia's. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone even but edged with steel. Rachel didn't answer her. Marcus stood. Calm, collected. "Stay here," he said softly to Elise. "I'll be right back." He followed Rachel toward the galley, his steps slow, deliberate. The whispers began the moment he left. Elise sat still, her posture perfect, but her hands were clenched. Nia tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, why did Daddy have to go?" "Just something with the tickets, sweetheart," Elise said. But her voice had tightened, her eyes scanning the cabin. She knew better. In the galley, Rachel turned, arms crossed. "Sir, your reservation seems to have been flagged." "Flagged?" Marcus repeated, his tone steady. "I bought these tickets personally." "Fully paid." "Confirmed." Rachel shifted. "It's not about the payment. It's just that. First class is a premium cabin. We have to be certain." There it was. The subtle shift in language. The words meant to sound neutral, but were loaded with assumptions. Marcus stared at her. A slow smile tugged at his lip, not amusement. Not kindness. Something sharper. "Premium cabin," he echoed. "Are you suggesting I don't belong here?" Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. "Of course not," she said quickly, defensively. "I just need to follow procedure." Marcus took a deep breath. Then, with calculated grace, he pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. He didn't need to. "Yes," he said into the phone. "It's time. Proceed." He ended the call. And turned back to Rachel with ice in his tone and steel in his gaze. "Shall we return to my family?" Rachel blinked. Something in her chest flickered, an unease. Not fear. But the beginnings of it. As they walked back to row 1, the whispers stopped. People watched. Silently. No one clapped. No one jeered. But the air was different now. A woman with silver hair whispered to her husband. They didn't do anything wrong. Elise stood as they approached. Rachel gestured toward them. "Sir," she said again. "I'm afraid we'll need you to move to the main cabin until this is sorted out." Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. But what he said next made the cabin hold its breath. "Are you suggesting my family move, because you don't believe people like us fly first class?" Rachel paled. And Elise stood, finally speaking, not as a wife, but as a woman who had held her composure long enough. "You've seen our tickets. You've made your judgment. Now the whole cabin has seen it too." The silence after that wasn't quiet. It screamed. The hum of the cabin was now electric, tense, charged, and uncertain. Passengers didn't speak so much as murmur, stealing glances at the family who had been wronged, but still sat upright, composed, unyielding. Marcus Caldwell's return to his seat hadn't been a retreat. It was the quiet before a shift. He sat down slowly beside Elise, who watched him with practiced calm. "Is it done?" she asked under her breath. He nodded once, just slightly. "It's in motion." Nia was playing with her light-up airplane again, unaware that her parents were in the middle of something far bigger than a ticketing error. Her innocence shielded her, but Elise and Marcus were no longer shielded from anything. They never had been. Behind the first-class curtain, Rachel Monroe gripped the edge of the galley counter. Her fingers twitched. Her breath hitched. She stared at the service phone, which sat silently now, as if mocking her. Why hadn't the ground staff pushed back? Why did they sound so certain? Was there something she'd missed? She picked up the phone again, this time dialing internal operations. A soft voice answered. Ops desk, Gina speaking. This is Monroe on flight 764. I need to confirm the profile of a first-class passenger, Marcus Caldwell. He's in row 1A. There was a pause. Caldwell. One moment. Clicking sounds echoed over the line. Then Gina's tone changed. Ma'am, are you calling to upgrade, demote, or flag him? Rachel stiffened. I'm just verifying an irregularity. Is he a frequent flyer? Another pause. Then. Ms. Monroe, Mr. Caldwell isn't a regular passenger. He's a primary executive shareholder. Rachel's heart nearly stopped. What? You're flying one of the owners, Gina replied matter-of-factly. Is there an issue? Rachel's lips went dry. No. No issue. Thank you. She hung up. Her hand trembled. She didn't return to the cabin right away. Instead, she braced both hands against the galley wall and stared blankly into the space between two coffee dispensers. Owner. Not guest. Not VIP. Owner. It wasn't the kind of power you could sweet-talk or appease with a fruit plate. And worse, he had said nothing. He had simply made a call. What had he set in motion? Back in the first-class cabin, other passengers began to murmur more openly. An elderly woman leaned toward her husband. They've been nothing but polite, she whispered. What's this really about? A younger man with noise-canceling headphones pulled one side off and turned toward Marcus. Sir, he said, cautious but clear, if you want to raise this, I'd be happy to record a statement. I saw everything. Marcus offered a courteous smile, but shook his head gently. Thank you. Let's wait. His tone wasn't dismissive, it was patient. Strategic. He didn't need chaos. He needed timing. 35,000 feet above the ground, the ripples had reached the earth. In a high-rise office in Midtown Manhattan, a notification pinged across several executive dashboards. It wasn't a red alert. Not yet. But it was flagged, Level 3, Board Watch. The content of the notification. Subject, Marcus Caldwell, Shareholder Experience Flag. Flight 764 JFK-LAX. Incident, seating dispute/racial profiling suspected. Action recommended, immediate observation and escalation. At the top of the notification chain sat one name. Thomas Everett, CEO. In his private office, Everett scrolled through the alert and immediately called his chief of operations. Why the hell am I hearing about a problem on a flight involving Marcus Caldwell before landing? Meanwhile, on flight 764, the curtain twitched. Rachel reappeared. She moved slowly this time, not with the authority she once exuded, but with something closer to caution. Or maybe fear. Marcus looked up. Rachel tried to smile. It didn't quite land. Mr. Caldwell, she began, I want to apologize for the confusion earlier. It appears your reservation is indeed confirmed. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Indeed, he echoed. Is there a reason you believed otherwise? Rachel hesitated. Just a procedural check. Sometimes the system. I've used this system, Marcus interrupted quietly. I know exactly how it works. Rachel flinched, then turned toward Elise. "We're happy to bring complimentary drinks or anything else your family might need," she offered, tone bordering on pleading. Elisa's gaze was a razor's edge. "We need respect. Not drinks." Rachel nodded stiffly, then retreated behind the curtain once more. In the galley, Rachel's colleague Dana Lopez stood with arms folded. She had watched everything from a careful distance, her expression growing tighter by the minute. "You screwed up," Dana said, not unkindly, but not gently either. "I didn't know who he was," Rachel hissed under her breath. "That's the point," Dana replied. "You judged him before you even saw the name on the ticket. You looked at the hoodie and made a call." "I was following protocol," Dana cut in. "I've flown 2 years with you, Rachel. You've never questioned a man in cargo shorts and flip-flops sitting in first class before. What's different this time?" Rachel opened her mouth. Closed it. Dana turned and left her standing there. At the airline's HQ, the gears were turning. CEO Thomas Everett was already in a conference call with legal and PR. "This needs to be contained," he said. "If this breaks before landing, we'll be trending within the hour. I want a real-time timeline of everything. Names, quotes, cabin records." His chief legal officer sighed. "This isn't just a customer, Tom. It's Caldwell. The guy holds 2 board seats. If this goes public, it's not just a PR issue. It's corporate governance." Everett ran a hand through his hair. "I want a statement drafted. I want that flight monitored. And for God's sake, someone make sure Rachel Monroe doesn't speak to a journalist when we land." In first class, Marcus typed a message on his phone. "Update, intervention initiated. Observing behavior. No apologies accepted at this time. Let's see how far this goes." He hit send. Elise leaned closer. "Are you sure you don't want to say anything now?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. We watch." There was no need to shout. When you hold the system, you don't scream. You calibrate. As the plane crossed into Ohio airspace, turbulence hit. Not outside. Inside. Rachel fumbled with a tray. Her hands weren't steady. Her mind wasn't calm. She had dealt with complaints before, missed meals, delayed flights, loud passengers. But never this silence. This heavy, calculated silence from someone who could ruin careers with a sentence. And she had handed him the perfect reason. 30 minutes before descent, another ping reached Everett's phone. Subject, internal alert, Flight 764. Status, passenger Caldwell has not requested onboard resolution. Escalation likely. Everett stood from his chair. "This is going to board-level fallout if we're not ahead of it," he told his team. "When that flight lands, I want a team waiting. Apology in hand. Arranged transport. Media management. The works." He stared out the window for a moment, then added. "And somebody pull Monroe's record. I want to know everything about her before the press does." Back on board, the sun dipped lower, casting orange light across Nia's sleeping face. Elise leaned her head back and whispered. "We shouldn't have to stay quiet to be treated decently." Marcus looked at his daughter. Then his wife. "We're not staying quiet," he said. "We're just choosing the right time to make noise." The plane jolted gently as it descended through low cloud layers above Los Angeles. Passengers began to stir, gathering their belongings, adjusting their seats. But in row 1, time had frozen. Rachel Monroe stood once more before the Caldwell family, clutching her tablet with a white-knuckled grip. Her voice came tight, rehearsed, but brittle. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you and your family to move to the main cabin until we can fully verify your reservation." The audacity in the words made the silence that followed deafening. Marcus didn't move. His face didn't change. He simply tilted his head, a faint gesture, but one that made several passengers nearby hold their breath. "Our tickets have already been verified," he said evenly. "Paid. Confirmed. Boarded. What's changed?" Rachel's eyes darted to the side, searching for support that wasn't there. "It's just protocol, sir. We're trying to avoid a disruption." From the corner of the cabin, a passenger muttered, "This is the disruption." Another, older voice, a man in a business blazer from 1D, cut in louder. "Why are they being singled out? They've done nothing wrong." The pressure in the cabin shifted. The watching became witnessing. Elise Caldwell stood slowly. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were steel. "You're embarrassing my daughter," she said. "You've embarrassed all of us." She turned to Nia, who sat frozen, her toy plane gripped tightly in her small hands, the blinking lights no longer amusing. Rachel stiffened. "If you don't comply, I'll have to call security once we land." "Then do it," Marcus said, rising. His voice was low, calm, but it carried weight like thunder. "And when you do, make sure they bring a reason." His eyes locked on hers. And she blinked first. But the damage had been done. Passengers watched in shock and slow disbelief as Marcus began gathering his family's belongings. Elise held Nia's hand tightly, her jaw clenched, her chin high. They didn't argue. They didn't yell. They walked, a family of 3, ousted in silence, dignity their only armor. The walk to the main cabin felt longer than the flight itself. People turned to look, some confused, others visibly upset. A woman whispered, "This is going to go viral." Another muttered, "They didn't deserve this." Elise felt the stares like lashes. But Marcus? Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, as they reached the cramped center row seats in row 24, he gently helped Nia into her seat, brushing a loose curl from her forehead, and sat beside her. He didn't speak. He simply reached for his phone. One message. One recipient. One sentence. "They forced us out. Begin the documentation." Back in first class, Rachel returned to the galley, her steps uneven. She was sweating now, despite the chill of the air vents. Her thoughts raced. She hadn't expected them to comply so easily. She hadn't expected the other passengers to speak up. And she hadn't expected the sinking weight in her chest. Dana Lopez turned from the service station, arms crossed. "What the hell are you doing, Rachel?" Rachel didn't answer. Dana didn't wait. "They paid for those seats. You know it. Everyone knows it. And you still moved them. Why?" "I was following protocol." "No," Dana said coldly. "You were following a gut feeling. You just didn't like what you saw." Rachel turned away, her stomach churning. Elsewhere, the fallout had already begun. In a sleek boardroom on the 41st floor of the airline's LA headquarters, executives huddled around a large display screen. The CEO, Thomas Everett, was no longer calm. He was furious. "They moved him." His assistant nodded grimly. "Yes, sir." The attendant, Rachel Monroe, had the family moved from first class about 15 minutes ago. Without a valid reason. Everett slammed a palm against the table. That wasn't just a bad decision. That was a career-ending one. He turned to legal. "What are we exposed to? Discrimination. Wrongful removal. Reputational damage. And a shareholder grievance." Everett pinched the bridge of his nose. He's not going to settle for an apology. No, another exec replied. He's going to burn us to the ground. Back on Flight 764, Row 24 had become a sanctuary of resolve. Elise sat between Marcus and Nia, staring straight ahead. Her fingers rested on her daughter's knee. But her mind was elsewhere. She remembered the look on Rachel's face, how she scanned Marcus from head to toe like a question mark. Like a threat. She remembered Nia asking, "Why are we moving, Mommy?" And she remembered her restraint. Her silence. A silence that wouldn't last much longer. In first class, the mood had turned. The whispers had grown teeth. Passengers were upset. Some were angry. Others shocked. But most of them were thinking the same thing. That could have been me. Or worse, my child. A man leaned toward Dana as she served drinks. "You know what just happened wasn't right." Dana nodded. "I know. I hope he sues," the man muttered. "This airline deserves it." In the cockpit, the captain's headset crackled. It was a direct call from ground control, not typical. Not normal. Flight 764, be advised, security will be meeting the aircraft at Gate 17. Executive directive. Copy that, the captain replied, glancing at his co-pilot. What's this about? Passenger removal. High priority protocol. Non-passenger is being held for questioning. The co-pilot raised an eyebrow. This just got interesting. As the wheels touched down on the tarmac, Marcus leaned toward Elise. This is the turning point. She looked at him, eyes burning. Then let's make it count. The cabin filled with the usual chaos of landing, seat belts, bags, overhead bins. But in row 24, there was only stillness. Marcus didn't rise. He sat, watching. Waiting. Elise held Nia's hand and whispered soothing things in her ear, but her posture was that of a queen, not a victim. From their seats, they could see the movement at the front of the plane. 2 uniformed security officers had boarded. Passengers paused. Phones began recording. Rachel stood by the galley, pale as porcelain, trembling. One officer looked around. Miss Monroe. She stepped forward. Yes. Please remain on board. We'll need a full account of your actions once passengers have deplaned. Rachel's mouth fell open slightly. I was just following orders. Then you shouldn't have a problem explaining them, the officer said. Passengers began exiting, but none walked past Marcus without a look. Some gave a nod of solidarity. Others simply glanced, ashamed. One older woman paused briefly. I'm sorry, she whispered. That never should have happened. Marcus smiled politely. But it did, he replied. And now it's being addressed. The woman nodded slowly. Then walked on. As the last passenger disembarked, Rachel remained frozen by the galley, flanked by the 2 security guards. Marcus finally rose. He helped Elise gather their things, adjusted Nia's jacket, and turned toward the front of the plane. Rachel tried to speak. Mr. Caldwell, I. He raised a hand. Not here. His tone was flat. Cold. Final. The people waiting for me will hear your apology. And decide what to do with it. Then he walked off the plane. The crowd waiting beyond the gate wasn't full of paparazzi, it was worse. Executives. Lawyers. Assistants. PR handlers. All with tight smiles and pale faces. And at the center stood Thomas Everett himself. The sliding glass doors to the jet bridge hissed open with mechanical indifference. But what waited on the other side was anything but indifferent. Marcus Caldwell stepped into a quiet storm. In front of him stood Thomas Everett, CEO of Orion Skies Airlines, flanked by a line of executives who looked like they were holding their breath. A few of them shifted uncomfortably. Some pretended to check their watches. None of them dared speak first. Marcus walked forward slowly, Elise and Nia just behind him. He didn't rush. He didn't pause. He didn't shake a single hand. Everett stepped forward, offering one anyway. "Mr. Caldwell," he began, voice taut with apology, "thank you for your time." Marcus walked right past the hand. Straight toward the conference lounge. They had hastily converted it into a crisis meeting room. "Let's not waste it," Marcus said, without turning around. Everett froze for half a second, then followed. The others trailed after them like shadows. Inside the makeshift boardroom, a long table had been cleared. A carafe of water. Notepads. Nervous energy. Marcus sat at the head, not because it was offered, but because it was understood. Elise sat beside him, Nia quietly coloring in her seat, still unaware that her parents were about to shift corporate policy with nothing but truth and leverage. Thomas Everett took the opposite seat. His hands were folded. His suit was too tight under pressure. "First, Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I want to extend my deepest apologies for." Marcus raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Don't apologize yet." Everett blinked. I beg your pardon." "Don't apologize," Marcus repeated calmly, "until you understand exactly what you're apologizing for." A beat of silence fell. Then Marcus leaned forward, fingers steepled. "This isn't just about one employee's bias. It's about the system you built that gave her permission to act on it." One of the PR executives cleared her throat. "We've already suspended the flight attendant pending investigation, and we're preparing an official statement." Marcus didn't even look at her. "What's your company's policy on profiling?" No one answered. "Is there a training module that teaches employees how to scan black passengers harder than white ones? Or did Rachel Monroe learn that from watching others do it?" Everett opened his mouth, but no words came out. Elise spoke instead. "She looked at us and assumed we didn't belong," she said evenly. Even when she held the truth in her hands. "That's not a policy problem," Marcus added. "That's a culture problem." There was a long, painful pause. Then Marcus dropped the real hammer. "I'm not here as a customer," he said. "I'm here as an owner." Everett nodded quickly. "Of course. Your stake is significant, and we value your partnership. Then you'll value what I'm about to say." He pulled a leather folio from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Everett opened it. Inside was a formal shareholder petition invoking the board's accountability clause. It demanded a full third-party audit of the airline's bias and discrimination complaints. Mandatory anti-bias training across all departments, not just cabin crew. A public apology, not just to the Caldwell family, but to all affected passengers. A permanent policy review panel, including community advocates, not just corporate figures. And finally, quarterly transparency reports are published to the public. Everett paled. This would go beyond just our airline. "Good," Marcus said. "It would attract attention. Media coverage. Investor scrutiny. Even better." Everett glanced at his legal counsel, who gave him a subtle shrug of "You have no legal ground to refuse this. You're forcing our hand." "I'm giving you a chance," Marcus corrected. "A chance to lead. Or a chance to fall." Elise leaned forward, locking eyes with the CEO. "This wasn't about our daughter being denied a seat," she said. "It was about her watching her parents be treated as less than human, and learning to accept that. We will not raise a daughter who believes her dignity is conditional." Everett looked at Nia. The little girl smiled innocently, holding up her coloring. "Daddy, look. I drew the airplane." Marcus smiled softly, then turned back to Everett. "This is what I'm protecting," he said. "Not just my child. But every child was watching from the aisle. Every mother is holding her breath. Every father swallows his pride." Another executive tried to shift the narrative. "We understand the emotion of this moment, Mr. Caldwell." "Do you?" Marcus asked. "Or do you just understand liability?" The room froze. Elise reached into her bag and placed a small, blinking device on the table. "A digital recorder. Full audio," she said. "From the moment we boarded. Including the moment your flight attendant said, 'You don't look like a first-class passenger.'" Everett's mouth went dry. "You have it recorded?" "We didn't raise our voices," Marcus said. "We raised the stakes." For a long time, no one spoke. Then, Everett exhaled slowly. "We'll comply," he said quietly. "We'll adopt your plan. All of it." Marcus nodded. But he wasn't done. "There's one more thing," he added. Everett looked up. "I want the apology delivered personally. Not in a press release. Not from a spokesperson. I want Rachel Monroe to look me in the eye and say it herself. That may not be advisable. Then it's non-negotiable." At that moment, Marcus's phone vibrated. A message from his legal team. "Media aware. Social momentum rising. Hashtag Flyfair trending nationwide." He showed it to Everett. "This isn't just a moment," he said. "It's a movement. And it started at 36,000 feet. With a toy plane and a mother's silence." He rose from his seat. "Now your silence ends." Everett remained seated, looking older than he had 30 minutes earlier. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell." Marcus turned. "Don't thank me yet," he said over his shoulder. "Thank me when you've changed something." Back in the terminal, Elise and Nia waited near the private car arranged to take them home. Nia had fallen asleep on a bench, her head resting on her mother's lap. Elise stroked her daughter's hair gently. Marcus stepped beside them, the weight of the confrontation settling into his shoulders. "It's done," he said. "Not yet," Elise replied. "But it started." They looked down at Nia. And then beyond her, to the airline banners overhead, the bustling crowd, the quiet eyes watching. Marcus took Elise's hand. "She'll grow up flying in a world better than the one we boarded this morning." Elise smiled faintly. "Because we refused to land quietly." Rachel Monroe sat alone in a glass-walled conference room. Her uniform was freshly pressed, but her hands trembled as she gripped a paper cup of now-cold coffee. Through the glass, she could see them, 3 figures waiting outside, a senior HR manager, an attorney from corporate compliance, and a man in a tailored charcoal suit who had said nothing since entering the building. That man was from the Executive Review Board. He didn't need to speak. His silence was louder than any scolding. Rachel glanced at the clock. It was barely noon, but the day had already lasted a lifetime. The incident report she had been forced to fill out lay flat on the table. Every word she wrote only made things worse. "I thought their tickets might not be valid. They didn't look like our usual first-class clientele." By the time she reread it, even she couldn't deny what it sounded like. The door opened. "Miss Monroe," said the HR manager, voice clipped. "They're ready for you now." Rachel stood, legs shaking slightly. She straightened her collar, took a breath, and stepped into the larger boardroom, where the temperature felt 10 degrees colder. On one end of the table sat the review committee. On the other hand, watching silently was Thomas Everett, the CEO himself. And seated beside him, legs crossed, was Marcus Caldwell. Rachel nearly stumbled. She hadn't expected him to be there. She had assumed this would be procedural, not personal. "Please be seated," said the legal officer. She obeyed. The chair creaked beneath her. Marcus didn't speak. He didn't even look at her. He sat still, arms resting gently on the table, his gaze fixed forward. But that, somehow, was worse than being yelled at. Thomas Everett broke the silence. "Miss Monroe, you've been summoned here to account for your actions aboard Flight 764. We have reviewed internal audio recordings, passenger statements, staff testimonies, and the flight manifest." He paused, fingers laced tightly. "What we've seen paints a disturbing picture." Rachel tried to speak, but Marcus raised a hand gently. Everett nodded. "Mr. Caldwell has requested the opportunity to speak before your statement. And we've granted it." Rachel turned slowly to Marcus, who finally turned his head toward her. His eyes were calm. Cold. Controlled. "You saw my family and decided we didn't belong," he said. "You looked at my daughter's smile and thought it was out of place. You looked at my wife's grace and chose to question it." His voice never rose above conversational. But every word landed like a gavel. "You held the truth in your hand, our tickets, and still chose your assumptions." Rachel's throat tightened. I didn't mean to offend. I was following protocol," he cut in. "That excuse won't hold anymore." He leaned forward slightly. "Because I helped write that protocol. I know it better than you do." The room fell silent again. Thomas Everett cleared his throat. "Miss Monroe, you are being placed on immediate administrative leave, pending formal termination proceedings." Rachel froze. "Termination? You failed to follow verification procedures. You ignored system confirmations. You escalated a situation without cause." "But," Rachel started, voice cracking. "And most critically," Everett continued, "you exercised bias that resulted in the unjust removal of a family from a paid seating class, causing reputational and operational damage to the company." "I didn't know who he was," she whispered. Marcus finally stood. "That's the point." He looked around the room. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them like a human being." Rachel sat still as the weight of it collapsed onto her. Not just the end of her job, but the end of her certainty. The end of being the one who decided who belonged. She lowered her head, finally unable to meet anyone's eyes. After the meeting, Rachel was escorted from the building. No dramatic scene. No press. No confrontation. Just quiet. Final. She stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed, she saw Marcus standing in the hallway, arms folded. He wasn't gloating. He looked tired. As if holding people accountable had become a burden, not a victory. Across the city, Elise Caldwell sat at their kitchen island, sipping coffee while watching a live stream from a national news outlet. On the screen, Airline faces scrutiny after racial profiling of shareholder family. The anchors spoke in grave tones. Public pressure was rising. Civil rights organizations had begun calling for hearings. Social media had turned #FlyFair into a full-blown movement. Elise scrolled through the comments. Finally, someone with power doing something real. This is about dignity, not privilege. They stayed calm. We won't. She smiled faintly, then looked at the drawing Nia had left on the table, a picture of a plane with 3 stick figures inside. Underneath, the words, "We belong everywhere." That afternoon, Thomas Everett called a press conference. He stood in front of reporters, cameras, and live-streaming phones. Behind him were banners bearing the airline's logo, ironic symbols of unity. "Today, we acknowledge that our systems failed," he began. "We failed a family who deserved our respect, our service, and our trust. We allowed bias to override protocol. We allowed silence to override justice." He took a breath. "But that ends now." He listed the changes being implemented: policy reform, anti-bias training, an independent oversight committee, and quarterly transparency reports. Then, he added, "This is not a gesture of goodwill. This is a contract with our customers, and with the world watching." And to Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, he continued, "We are not asking for forgiveness. We are committing to change." Back at the Caldwell home, Marcus watched the broadcast silently. Elise stood behind him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "He said the right things," she murmured. Marcus nodded. Slowly. "Now we'll see if he does the right things." That night, Rachel Monroe sat on the floor of her apartment, staring at the termination letter on her screen. She had opened and closed it 5 times. The words never changed. But something inside her was shifting. She pulled out her phone and opened her email. A new message draft. Subject: Apology. Recipient: Marcus.Caldwell at. She hesitated. Typed. Dear Mr. Caldwell. I want to apologize, not as a professional, but as a person. I was wrong. I judged what I saw instead of seeing who was in front of me. I now understand that my silence, my tone, my assumption, they weren't neutral. They were weapons I didn't realize I was holding. I know I cannot undo what I did. But I intend to spend the rest of my life learning how not to repeat it. If you never respond, I will understand. But I wanted to say, I am sorry. Rachel Monroe. She stared at it. Then hit send. The next morning, Marcus woke to dozens of notifications. Press requests. Supportive messages. Anonymous threats. Legal updates. But among them, one stood out. Rachel Monroe's email. He read it slowly. Without emotion. Then again, this time aloud, for Elise to hear. When he finished, she said nothing for a moment. Then. Will you respond? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. Ever. He looked out the window at the soft sunrise breaking over the rooftops. Maybe. If she earns it. The studio lights were too bright. Marcus Caldwell adjusted his lapel mic while a makeup artist dabbed powder along his jawline. Elise, poised as ever in a navy blue dress, sat beside him on the couch, her hands folded over her knees. Across from them, the show's host, a nationally recognized journalist named Selena Cross, sorted through notes with a seriousness that matched the tone of the broadcast. Her voice had narrated political scandals and presidential debates, but tonight, it was something far more intimate. Behind the camera, a countdown began. We go live in 5, 4, 3. And with a subtle shift in posture, the world was watching. Good evening, America, Selena began, her voice smooth but firm. Tonight, we speak not with politicians, celebrities, or CEOs, but with the people whose quiet dignity has shaken a billion-dollar industry. She turned to the camera. With us this evening are Marcus and Elise Caldwell, whose experience aboard Flight 764 ignited a national conversation about bias, dignity, and the quiet power of accountability. The camera cut to Marcus and Elise. The set was warm, wood-toned, with soft jazz playing faintly under the opening. Selena leaned forward. First of all, thank you. Not just for being here. But for handling what happened with such restraint. The public didn't see rage. They saw resilience. Marcus nodded slightly. Restraint wasn't a strategy, he said. It was our only option. Selena blinked. Explain that. If I had raised my voice that day, Marcus continued, we wouldn't be sitting here. We'd be defending ourselves in a courtroom. Or worse, reduced to a headline without a voice. Elise picked up where he left off. We stayed calm because our daughter was watching. But we acted because we want a world where she doesn't have to. Selena's expression softened. Let's go back, she said gently. To the moment Rachel Monroe asked to see your tickets. What did you feel? Elisa's eyes sharpened, but her voice remained even. I felt nothing at first. Because we're used to it. Used to it? Selena echoed. Yes, Marcus replied. The second glances. The extra questions. The random searches. You learn to smile through it. He paused. But that day, my daughter was old enough to notice. The audience, mostly silent, shifted in their seats. In a side-by-side screen, images of Marcus, Elise, and Nia boarding the flight appeared. A shot of Nia holding her toy plane. A still from the cabin security feed, showing Rachel's face just before she asked to verify the tickets. Selena turned to the audience. For those just joining us, Marcus Caldwell is not just a first-class passenger. He's a primary shareholder in the very airline whose employee removed him and his family from their paid seats. But this isn't a story about wealth. It's a story about perception. Across the country, millions watched. In bars, lounges, and break rooms. On buses. In airports. Some leaned forward with admiration. Others with discomfort. Some whispered. They're too composed. I would have sued. Others muttered. That flight attendant was just doing her job. But most were silent. Listening. Back in the studio, Selena opened a panel discussion. 2 more guests joined via video. A black high school teacher from Atlanta was wrongly profiled as a shoplifter in a mall. A Latina woman from Texas was removed from a hotel lobby because she didn't look like a guest. Each shared their story. Calmly. Painfully. Each different. Each is the same. Marcus sat with arms crossed, listening. Finally, Selena asked. What do we do next? Marcus looked straight into the camera. We normalize consequences. For too long, people in uniforms, behind desks, in positions of small power, have believed they can humiliate others without ever being held accountable. That ends when we stop settling for apologies. Elise leaned in. We don't need more training modules, she said. We need accountability. Not in theory, in contract. In policy. In every company handbook. The moment Rachel Monroe looked at us and assumed we didn't belong, she continued, she told every person watching that being black means being questioned. Selena asked gently, have you heard from her? Marcus hesitated. She sent an email. Did you respond? He shook his head. Not yet. Why not? Marcus answered without pause. Because redemption isn't a message. It's a journey. The audience broke into quiet applause. Selena turned back to the camera. Tonight's story is not just about a man who owns part of an airline. It's about a father who owns his silence until the moment it matters. A mother who redefines what dignity looks like in the face of humiliation. And a little girl who now knows that her family didn't walk away quietly. They stood. The camera zoomed slowly on Marcus and Elise. Thank you for reminding us, Selena said, that true power doesn't shout. It endures. After the taping, as the studio lights cooled and the crew began disassembling the set, Marcus and Elise stood in the hallway, decompressing. Selena approached them. You two did more in that hour than most do in a lifetime. Marcus smiled faintly. We're not done yet. Elise added, we never really started this for ourselves. Selena nodded. But you've given others permission to begin. She reached into her pocket and handed them a small note card. This is from a producer in DC. They're doing a national symposium on systemic bias next month. You should be there. Marcus took the card, glanced at it, and tucked it into his coat. Let them know we'll come. But we're not speaking as victims. Then how? Selena asked. As architects, Elise said, her voice sure of something better. That night, the Caldwells returned home. Mia was already asleep in the back seat of the car, her fingers curled around the same toy plane. The city lights blurred past the window, but Marcus wasn't looking out. He was watching his reflection. For years, he had helped build companies, fund ideas, and shape products that shaped the world. But tonight, he realized. The most important thing he would ever build was trust. In a quiet apartment across town, Rachel Monroe watched the same interview from her couch. She didn't cry. Not yet. But she felt something break. Not from guilt. But from understanding. For the first time, she truly heard them. The first email arrived at 3:12 a.m. Subject line, you're not just fighting one person. You're fighting a pattern. No name. No greeting. Just a message, short and sharp. I work for the airline. I've seen what Rachel did happen before. It's not just her. If you want to know more, meet me. I'm ready to talk. A location followed, an address in Queens. Anonymous. Marcus Caldwell sat in the glow of his laptop screen, the darkness of his study pressing around him. Elise entered quietly, robe tied around her waist, rubbing her eyes. You're still up. He turned the screen toward her. She read the message once. Then again. She didn't speak right away. Then softly. They're afraid. But not to lose their job. They're afraid of being part of the silence. Later that morning, at a small corner cafe with fogged-up windows and weak coffee, Marcus sat across from a woman in her early 30s, wiry frame, faded crew badge tucked discreetly into her coat pocket. Call me Sam, she said. She stirred her coffee nervously. I was part of the ground operations team for JFK terminal operations. The day you flew. That wasn't the first time something like this happened. Marcus leaned forward. He didn't interrupt. Sam continued. 3 months ago, we had a black veteran, guy in a wheelchair. They made him wait outside in the rain because someone didn't believe his boarding class was correct. A month before that, a Southeast Asian couple was flagged 3 times for random checks because someone said they looked anxious. They missed their flight. No compensation. And Rachel, she paused. This isn't new for her. She's been called in before. For comments. For tone. HR just swept it under the rug. They said she was efficient. Marcus's jaw tightened. Why are you telling me this? Sam met his eyes. Because I've filed 3 reports. I've used the chain of command. And every time, it gets buried. Because I'm not someone with power. She leaned closer, voice shaking. But you are. By midday, the report was drafted. A 14-page document compiled by Marcus's legal team, titled Pattern Recognition, a Cultural Breakdown Inside Orion Skies Airlines. It included Sam's testimony, 3 additional anonymous accounts from current employees, 5 customer complaints spanning 2 years, all involving racial profiling in ticket checks, boarding, and service interactions. It was sent directly to the Board of Directors, the Federal Aviation Civil Rights Office, and Thomas Everett, CEO. Attached was a message. This is no longer a PR issue. It's a systemic collapse. We expect a full leadership review, public transparency, and resignations where necessary. Within hours, the storm hit. A leaked copy of the report surfaced on a major news site. Within 30 minutes, it was trending on every platform. Hashtag Airline Reckoning. Hashtag Who Else Knew. Hashtag Not Just Rachel. At a hastily called press conference, CEO Thomas Everett stood before flashing cameras, visibly shaken. We are deeply troubled by the patterns outlined in this report. We are launching an independent investigation, and we will cooperate fully with all federal inquiries. But the reporters weren't there for talking points. One stood up, notebook in hand. Mr. Everett, did you personally ignore internal complaints about flight attendant Rachel Monroe before Flight 764? Another voice. Are you stepping down? Everett didn't answer. He blinked rapidly, swallowed hard, and walked off the stage. Inside Marcus and Elisa's home, the mood was quieter. They didn't celebrate. They didn't smile. They read the headlines in silence. Marcus looked over at Elise. It was never about her. No, she agreed. It was about the system that made her feel safe doing it. She opened her phone. Messages flooded in, some supportive, some aggressive. Then she saw one that made her pause. From Dana Lopez, a former colleague of Rachel Monroe. Thank you for exposing what we couldn't. You didn't just speak for your family. You spoke for all of us who weren't allowed to speak. Elise read it aloud. Marcus nodded slowly. Maybe the system's listening now. Back at the airline headquarters, Thomas Everett sat alone in his corner office. He had aged 5 years in 5 days. The internal review committee was already meeting, without him. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Chairman Bradley King, the most senior figure on the board. We need to talk. Your position is under review. It's no longer about what you said, it's about what you allowed. Everett stared at the screen. Then slowly, he removed the CEO's nameplate from his desk and turned it face down. In a quiet part of Brooklyn, Sam sat at her kitchen table, laptop open. She watched the press unravel live on TV, this time, not as a bystander. Her name hadn't been mentioned. But she didn't need it to be. Because for the first time, she had stopped being silent. And in her inbox, a message had arrived. From Marcus. Thank you for your courage. You didn't just help us. You helped fix something broken. Let's rebuild it together. That evening, Marcus and Elise took Nia to the park. The sunset was soft, and laughter floated on the breeze from the swings and slides. They sat on a bench as Nia ran ahead, her arms outstretched like airplane wings. She doesn't know the war we just fought, Elise said. Good, Marcus replied. She shouldn't have to. A pause. But one day, she'll know the peace we helped make. He looked up at the sky, planes streaking overhead, silent and distant. And that will be enough. It was a quiet Monday morning when Marcus Caldwell walked into the modest conference room on the 12th floor of the Orion Skies Transitional Headquarters. The chaos had cooled, but the air still carried the charge of something unfinished. Waiting inside was Rachel Monroe. No press. No recording devices. No suits. Just her and the man whose silence had unraveled her career, and more importantly, her certainty. She stood when he entered, but Marcus didn't gesture for her to sit. He walked to the window instead, staring out at the city skyline as if collecting clarity from its angles. I didn't expect you to say yes, Rachel finally said. Her voice was soft. Nothing like the clipped, cold tone she had once used when asking for his boarding passes. I didn't say yes to help you, Marcus replied. I said yes for everyone watching. He turned around. Rachel looked older. Not in age, but in awareness. The past weeks had stripped her of the armor she once wore with ease, authority, certainty, assumption. Why did you come then? She asked. Because closure doesn't come from policy, he said. It comes from people. He pulled out a chair across from her and sat. Calm. Still. So talk. Rachel inhaled, then exhaled, like someone preparing for a confession. I didn't know who you were. I didn't care about your money. Or your influence. Or your seat. She paused. What I saw was a version of something I'd been taught to be suspicious of. Without knowing it. It was in the training. In the subtle jokes. The way certain colleagues got flagged more. The way discretion always seemed to fall hardest on people who looked like you. Her voice cracked. I thought I was doing my job. But I realize now, I wasn't serving safety. I was serving fear. Marcus nodded slowly. Fear wears a uniform well, he said. It passes for caution. For protocol. For professionalism. But underneath, it's still fear. Rachel looked at him with unblinking honesty. I don't expect forgiveness. I expect a consequence. And I accept it. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then, quietly. You don't have my forgiveness. Rachel nodded. You have my attention, he added. And if you do something with that, maybe one day, you'll have more. Outside the building, Elise waited near the car, flipping through a folder of notes from the Reform Committee. Her expression was calm, but focused. She looked up as Marcus emerged. How was it? She asked. Honest, he said. She closed the folder. Do you regret going? He shook his head. Not for her, he said. For me. They stepped into the car, and for the first time in weeks, there was nothing left to plan. No more fires to extinguish. Only space. Later that week, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium of airline staff, new hires, legacy employees, executives. Behind him, a banner read, Orion Skies, the flight ahead. He stepped to the microphone. No slideshow. No teleprompter. Only truth. I was humiliated on one of your flights, he began. But that humiliation didn't start with one person. And it didn't end with one apology. It was systemic. Cultural. Silent. But silence isn't neutral. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Silence sides with power. Until someone breaks it. So we did. And now it's your turn. He walked off the stage to a standing ovation, not loud, not flashy. Just steady. Earnest. Because real change doesn't start with applause. It starts with accountability. Back home, Nia sat on the floor with her markers, drawing another airplane. This one had 3 people on board, her mom, and her dad. Above the plane, she had written, We helped fix the sky. Marcus framed it and placed it on his office wall the next morning. Not as a trophy. But as a compass. 2 months later, the airline published its first equity and accountability report, audited by an external human rights organization. The findings were honest. Uncomfortable. Transparent. But the reforms were real. Bias reporting tools had been rebuilt. Anonymous complaints were tracked and verified with action. Every executive, including Thomas Everett, who had since resigned, had gone through a review. More importantly, passengers began to notice. Not because things were perfect, but because people were trying. Because apologies were no longer silent. One afternoon, Marcus and Elise received a letter in the mail. No logo. No official seal. Just neat handwriting. It was from Dana Lopez. I stayed. I wanted to run. But I didn't. I wanted to disappear. But instead, I stood up. We're changing things. Not fast. Not easy. But it's happening. You gave us the courage to try. Thank you. For not burning it all down. For choosing to rebuild. Elise folded the letter and pressed it to her heart. Marcus smiled. That's the win, he said. And maybe that's what justice is. Not just consequences. Not just reform. But the chance to look at a broken system and say, you don't get to stay this way. And then doing the slow, hard work of helping it become something better. Not because it's easy, but because someone has to be first. And Marcus, Elise, and even little Nia. They were. This story isn't just about a man being forced out of a seat he rightfully paid for, it's about how quiet dignity can dismantle deep-rooted systems of bias, and how choosing calm in the face of injustice can sometimes shake the walls more than outrage. Marcus and Elise didn't raise their voices, but they raised the stakes. They reminded us that justice doesn't always wear a courtroom robe. Sometimes, it looks like a father standing tall for his daughter, or a mother refusing to let silence define their worth. What we learn from their journey is this: your voice matters, even if it trembles. Your presence matters, even if it's questioned. And your response to injustice can become someone else's permission to rise. Change doesn't always come with a bang, often, it begins with a whisper that refuses to go unheard. Let this story be a reminder that we all have the power to challenge what's wrong, not with hate, but with resolve, grace, and truth. Whether you've been judged unfairly or you've witnessed it in silence, it's never too late to stand up. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support more stories that inspire change and celebrate human dignity. Together, we can build a world where everyone is seen, respected, and treated as they deserve to be.